Hey Andrew,
Yo, yo,
how you doing, man?
doing great. Do you know how
Uh,
to set your virtual background?
I can. Would you rather me have something back there other than? I mean, there's a chance my cat might show up on the back
Yeah,
behind my head, and I don't really mind my clock in my room. So
that's all up to you, buddy.
cool, brother. Life is good.
There we go. Sophia's.
Nice. See, Kevin and I will probably argue about the fact that I think I would argue that Sophia's is a diner, and I think Kevin would say it isn't, but I'm not sure about it based on our
Well,
discussion.
let's save the fireworks for the show.
I'm excited to read your take. I didn't read it yet, but I'm excited to read your take on the Buffalo
I think it's
sports
I think it's
fan.
I think it's important to point out that it is an article that I wrote in 2016, but I think it still applies. So,
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was actually I was a season ticket holder back in the day, and I actually did get to go to the first Super Bowl, so I was there for Wide Right, and some of the longest like
that
three
was the
seconds.
actually wasn't that the fourth Super Bowl?
No, Wide
Well, the
Right was
first one was
fourth.
right, right. That's right.
Yeah,
See, the
and
trauma, it just wipes out everything. I.
from where we were sitting, because of the angle, Norwood finally kicked one low, and it was long enough. Like he had been
Roy,
floating.
we at least need to get a little more light on your face because you're looking kind of ghosty. You got anything you can kind of turn on a little bit there?
How's this? Let me actually see if that works better on the reflection thing. Better?
Yeah, that's better. I mean, we don't want you to have a ghostly pallor.
No, I would rather be a little. I am a little. I'm actually a little orange. I got snow. I got snowed into San Diego this week. I've been really lucky. I dodged the weather here, and then today I guess they got 3 inches of rain in 3 hours. Where I was staying in La Jolla Shores and had flooding all over I-5 and I-15. And so I made it out of San Diego before they got weather. I made it out of Buffalo before we got weather, and I sort of lucked out with the whole thing.
Alrighty then.
I just have fun telling people I got snowed into San Diego because I wanted to come home on Wednesday late afternoon, and Southwest rescheduled my flights 4 times until I didn't get home till Friday at midnight. So
So Thurston, are you with us? This is like a seance. I feel Kevin. He is nearby. Kevin, knock 3 times.
actually, I have a old piece of cabbage that's stuffed with Polish sausage, and Kevin's presence is in there all the time. It's pretty. It's like Korean cabbage and Polish sausage, so it works well. I hope he can hear
Yeah, I'm getting there.
me.
I never have to do any of this.
Oh my God, you have the best background ever. Is that Fiona's room?
Yep.
I love it.
Well, you made it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And judging from our pictures, only one of us is likely to do any federal time. So I tried to get Roy to lighten up his picture a little bit. He wasn't having it. What can I do? You know,
I'm, I'm hoping
this
my cat makes an appearance on the tower behind
this behind me is Sophia's, the modern Sophia's. Um, I was looking through my photographs and I figured, we're talking about diners. I understand that this might be a bone of contention later, and that's fine. Um, I just wanted you guys to know that, like, I'm a person who has close to zero what you would call native fashion sense, but even I was able to find the right T-shirt for talking to you guys on the internet. Oh, you can't see it. Talking heads.
Nice.
Um, so it's 7:01 p.m. And I would like to thank everyone who joined us tonight. on the 4 Bites Show to talk about diners, the heartland, the heart home cooking, feed the people every day, extension of your own kitchen when you can't cook kind of restaurants. That would be my take on it. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our definitions of diners, and we're going to take turns. And Roy, when I cut you off, you stay cut off, okay?
Ah,
Because I have a show to run here. And uh, so we're going to talk about our definitions of diners. We have different ones. I'm going to ask both of you to contribute up to 3 formative diners that you want to talk about. These are diners in your life. Okay. Later on in the show, we're going to come back and I'm going to ask you to talk about the 3 things within an hour's drive of City Hall or whatever that to you today most encapsulate what the diner is. Okay. So just get your brain sinking for a little bit later on. But first, for those who are not friends of yours, which I am a friend of yours, I would like you to, in less than a minute, introduce yourselves a little bit to people who might be coming across this later on YouTube. Just a little bit of your bona fides. Roy, you go first.
my name's Roy Bakos. I I like to wear shorts all year round. I worked in restaurants since I was 16. I have over 4 decades now. This is my first time not working in hospitality. Done everything from own to cook to dishwash to manage, write training guides, serve part-time. If there's a position in a restaurant, I've done it. Um, Own 2, and I also teach at Buffalo State College and at University of Buffalo. I teach English and writing at both places. I like to ski, play golf, go out to eat, hang out with my friends, and evidently, according to Andrew, I like to talk. So I'm going to try and be brief and let Kevin go.
Thank you, Roy. Kevin.
My name is Kevin Thurston. I am a father of a daughter whose room I am in right now. These clouds are done by local artist Angela Guest. Let's see. Like Roy, I've been in and out of restaurants for since before I could have work papers. Doing some under the table dishwashing on Niagara Falls Boulevard at like 14, getting cigarettes from the slot machine. And let's see, since then I have worked for public relations firms that have opened restaurants. I've owned a cafe, managed in New York, which is downstate, as well as Buffalo, New York. And I turns out I think I'm most locally known as being a vegan chef, maybe.
Yes. Well, your work at Tipico is speaks for itself as vegan chefiness. Also, non-vegan things there at Tipico. I think you made a name for yourself with that kind of thing. I mean, and you can cook other stuff too. So, Kevin, let's start with you. Diners. Uh, where'd you grow up, and what are your up to 3 formative diners? Just tell us a little bit about like why that's each one kind of set a diner thing for you.
Sure. I grew up at the Amherst Tonawanda border of Niagara Falls Boulevard on the Tonawanda side near Elk Creek Park. And I guess Perkins, which I now don't really kind of consider a diner for the sake of this conversation, but Perkins for sure. Tom's at Sheridan and Bailey. And then JJ's Cafe quite a bit too. Would be probably 3 that come into mind very quickly.
What about them made them diners for you that set your definition of diner? What tell us
I
what they're
think
like. For people who
free,
have never been there.
sure, free coffee refills are a prerequisite for a diner, I think. And then I also think the menu has to be like 80% breakfast.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, at the time, they held on to smoking as long as they possibly could too. That was kind of another definition of a diner, I think, versus other restaurants, which were probably a little quicker to. Bars and diners are like the weird bookends of restaurant worlds. It's like this is the last place you go to, and this is the first place you go to. so they kind of like meet in the back. And so I think both those places very much try to keep cigarettes a part of their patrons' options as long as possible.
All right, Roy.
For me, I was born in the east side of Buffalo, grew up in Depew, Lancaster, but I got lucky. I got a scholarship to go to Canisius High School, so I got to know friends from all over the place. And ironically, I'm sure the Perkins locations are different locations, but out of my three, JJ's is an honorable mention for me because of all my friends who went to St. Joe's. But Tom's Diner was a staple in my life on Bailey and Sheridan. Perkins when I was in high school and a kid. And also for me, probably the last one would be a tie between, and Kevin and I will probably argue about whether it's a diner or not, but Zorba's on Transit Road, which serves a ton of breakfast and like one of the original Texas Hot Freak spots, because I grew up out there. And then the other one that is would be there for me is the original Panos on Elmwood, because I lived over on the west side out of high school. And I agree with Kevin for a diner, 24 hours. I wouldn't say 80% breakfast, but I would say gotta be able to get breakfast at all times. And then I think that's the biggest thing. And the free coffee, the cigarette smoking was a giant thing. And for my group of friends, the other thing is that a diner, the feel of the diner for me is a lot to do with the diner. Once you became regulars, like one of our things at Tom's, we had this waitress. I had a group of friends of about 20 of us who would go there. And we would go 5, 10, 11, 6 at a time, different nights of the week. And we had a couple of regular waitresses, one of whom, Judy, I'm sure Kevin would remember, curly hair and glasses, was there forever. And once you became a regular and they knew you were going to tip them for their time rather than just off the check, like even if you were only having a coffee and sharing fries and something else, you could sit for hours and nobody would throw you out. I mean, I remember when we were kids, during the day, you rode your bike or you went somewhere and you went to the arcade. You know, I joke around with my students and they were like, what was it like growing up in the 80s? And I'm like, Stranger Things minus the upside down. Like they nail it. You go to the mall or you go to the arcade. And then as you got older, if your fake ID didn't work to go into bars or even after you did go in the bar, you always got breakfast after you went to a bar or after you went to a house party or after you drank beers down on the railroad tracks. And you could do it at a diner because they were always open. And you could sit there for 2-3 hours while you had coffee, had breakfast, and sobered up and have conversations with your friends. So it's a cultural thing for me too, not just the food. And I think we're lucky in Buffalo because we have so many. We had a lot of diners, and then we also a lot of our diners are the classic Greek diner, which is sort of evolved into more full scale restaurants now. But back when we were all younger, I mean, I think Panos was definitely a diner. Hillview was a diner. Garden View was a diner. Tom's was a diner, even though they served dinner and fish fries and other things.
I'm just going to interrupt there to point out, just for anyone who's following along out there, don't assume that places we're mentioning are close. Tom's, home of the souvlaki, at Sheridan and Bailey,
Hey, home.
still open. Hillview, I mean, these places are still there. So I want to come around to something that both of you pointed out when you talked about your definition of diners, because one of the things we're going to get around to is you guys are going to hold forth on what is and what is not a diner. And I will join you in that. But first, I have to ask, we've mentioned smoking, we've mentioned 24 hours. So those two things are dead as doornails. They are gone and not coming back. So does this leave us, by your formulation, in a place where soon there will be no diners? Because the things that made a diner, some of them are just gone forever. You will never be able to go into Perkins at 2 a.m. and stay there till 4 a.m. drinking coffee like I used to. So does that mean we're just out of luck?
I would say two things. One, I don't think the diner has ended. I think the cultural experience that we know that was the diner from through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even early 2000s just like the cultural experience of the mall or the cultural experience of the arcade, of places where people from all walks of life, kids and even older people, could go out and have these public spaces to congregate and stay for longer times. Those are they're all gone. They've changed. Doesn't mean we still don't have shopping areas. Doesn't mean we, so the diner still exists, but that diner culture, in the same way in the same way that coffee house culture has changed a lot as well. Because I think for me anyway, the diner shifted into a coffee house culture with my friend at Stimulants, but the culture of the diner and the culture of the coffee was very similar for me in the mid 80s to late 90s, when I was through my late teens to my late 20s. Those were the spaces where if you didn't want to drink and have conversations and hang out with your friends, those were the places you could go and do it. And those ideas of doing it late at night or even having those places, that is good.
So you're what you're identifying as a place for people to hang out late at night or early in the morning. You're saying that doesn't happen now?
Not in the same way. And I think even the early in the morning thing, a lot of it has to do with, I mean, economics. You know, I love, so you have Sophia's behind you. I love Sophia's. I'll maintain that old Sophia's was a diner, new Sophia's is a diner, classic Greek, mostly breakfast, but also good lunches, good dinners at times. They have a bar. They're amazing. They execute well. They do things that are simple and perfect. Never had a bad meal at Sophia's. They're absolutely phenomenal. They can't have you hang out for an hour and a half. Their model and the amount of money they have to spend to do the quality they do and employ their staff and pay for everything, they need you to be up and out after 45 minutes. Maybe you luck out, you can go as by yourself and sit at the counter for an hour and 20 minutes and banter with a whole bunch of people, or you run into some regulars. But for the most part, it's got to be an in and out. The thing that looks most like a classic diner, the diner in Larkinville, the old train diner, you can't linger there for more than 45 minutes. And again, partly because of the cost, the operations, it's got to be more turn and burn these days. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business. As cost has gone up, and the cost of doing those business, that business has gone up. That same kind of lingering. I mean, I notice it now where it happens now is big corporate spaces. You know, you see all the old guys and kids playing cards at Tim Hortons at 10 o'clock. Like drive by at Tim Hortons in Tonawanda or West Seneca or Cheektowaga. It's filled with old people or it's filled with kids, and they hang out because no one's going to kick them out of Tim Hortons because they're making all their money on the drive-thru. Anywhere that's making their money on seats, they have to throw you out. Unfortunately, it's not a model for hanging out.
Like you just said, that Tim Hortons is the new diner for social gathering purposes.
Culture-wise, it very well may be. I mean, it doesn't meet the definition food-wise. It doesn't meet the definition of other things. But as far as filling that cultural space, you know, I think Tim Hortons probably does it more than anybody else. And I mean, literally, every time I go around the location, there's always 7 or 8 old people and 6 or 7 15 to 18-year-olds hanging out doing whatever they're doing. You know, every once in a while you get it a little bit with a Starbucks. Maybe you get it a little bit at Spot, but you know, so that culture-wise gap has been built there, I think.
Sitting so quietly and patiently. I'm curious whether you think this sounds kind of like a bunch of old white guys whining about the way things used to be.
No, I think you can be aware of change without necessarily bitching about it. And I think that's a little bit of what we're doing here. I do agree that
help me out here. What are you identifying that has changed, other than we've talked about there aren't as many diners as there used to be, and they're not open 24 hours. But let's face it, when we want our diner needs met, we have no places to go. It's not like they're quite extinct, are they?
No, but I think the one thing that Roy and I are both very much pointing to throughout this whole thing so far is like that third space for public gathering. And now that, like, you know, places know down to the square foot what they need to be doing per hour to be viable, it is no longer okay to give people 10 cups of coffee as they sit there and like have 2 eggs, right? Like and sit there for 4 hours. That's just not really allowed. The closest thing that happens now is in coffee shops, but that is more like um, people working without an office. Like, coffee shops, as somebody who works in one, are very much more like public workspaces than they are public gathering spaces.
If what you're saying is true, that would seem to follow then that some of us here in this conversation would have run into an experience recently in a diner when we were asked to vacate the premises. I've never been asked in a diner or diner setting, we're going to need that table. I've been asked that in many fine dining settings, frankly, never at a diner.
Well, two things there. And again, this is coming from a long time front of house guy who loved it when I had guests sit for 3 hours, and on days when I didn't have guests that sit for 3 hours, knew exactly what to do to ask guests to leave without asking them to leave. Dropping a check, not filling a coffee as quickly, not asking if they want another beer, not asking if they want dessert. There's 1,000 ways to ask you to leave without asking you to leave, so you don't feel like you're forcing people out. And I think
I'll accept that. And have you experienced more, hey, honey, you got to get moving, nonverbal communication recently? I'm just asking what has changed.
At every one of the places, at other than like at Sophia's, your checks dropped after 40 minutes, 35 minutes. At the diner in Larkinville, your checks dropped on the table. If there's a wait, there's people at the door, and it's just, here's your check, thank you very much. And it's not rude, and it's not nasty, but I think it's, and I also, quite honestly, I think it's understood by most of the people who go to them that they're not set up. I mean, they're not set up to be those that third. What did you call it? Third rail cultural space. Ken?
Third space.
Third space.
Third room.
Third room. Okay,
home,
sure.
work, third space.
And I think that I'm not lamenting that it's gone in a lot of ways, or shaking my fist at it as like an old guy saying, "Oh, it was so much better when." I will say this, even though our needs might be being met by Tim Hortons and stuff, it's highly corporatized. And quite honestly, I could get a meal at Tim, or I could get a meal at Perkins, or I could, even in Perkins was a corporate space, but it was still, I would make an argument that the quality was much better at those places. If you wanted to get eggs and a sandwich, I mean, I was getting real pita bread. I was getting real feta. I was getting real chicken. I was getting that I'm not getting at Tim Hortons. I'm getting the microwave Burger King bagel sandwich at Tim Hortons if I want to.
All right, shame on you for going to Tim Hortons and not going down to the street to one of the diners that still exists to serve you today.
You're missing. Shame on me for going there. Shame, sure, but the thing is at 11:30 at night, unless I want to drive to maybe the Olympic on Sheridan and Military, who else is open? Who's there? Who's
absolutely,
there?
absolutely. The hours of availability, that has definitely changed. But I'm just trying to tease out what has really changed from what is, gosh, I really like that place, the way things used to be, which is the same and for all time. And when I'm thinking of some of the diners that I have been in over the years, where there literally was people waiting, like standing waiting. If you think I got laser eyeballs any less 20 years ago when I was dawdling from the people who were standing there waiting to get their banana pancakes than you do today, I mean, I guess I'm accepting that things have changed, but I'm trying to get us to determine like which has changed and which is kind of, nostalgia.
I think some of it is nostalgia. I think we also have to be important, especially the three of us, Andrew. And I think this is something, and I have a hard time with this a lot. And I'm not, and this, please don't take this as me blowing my own horn or anything crazy. But I would argue it happens to you, and I would argue it happens to Kevin. A lot of the places we go to on the regular, people know us. People know we're in the business. People know that if they drop us a $16 check, we're going to get a $10 tip out of the $16 check. People know we're going to pre-bus our table. People know that we're going to take care of it. People know that we're going to ask, do you need this table if there is a line? Because we all watch the places if we've been in hospitality. So I would make an argument that we might be a little biased in how we get treated when we go to certain places. I mean, I remember there have been many times.
Yep. Kevin's turn to talk.
I think the other end of what Roy is saying is, I think
Don't talk more about what he has to say. I want to hear what Kevin has to say.
well, I don't have any of my own ideas.
Oh, okay.
Is that I think as two people who have operated a space though too, we are more aware of the subtext of what's happening all around us inside an establishment, right? And so, like, I don't think I'd ever try to stay anywhere 3 hours unless I was drinking booze at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe times have changed. Restaurants haven't just become the places people hang out. Is that something to mourn? Do you have no places to go other than absolutely late at night souvlaki?
I don't think it's a big deal either way. I just think it just is. Like I don't need to mourn it, but I do want to acknowledge it and have it acknowledged and spoken about.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, I might go a step further than that because I don't necessarily mourn it, but I can tell you some of my greatest friendships, and again, going through a phase where I drank and did stuff when I was a kid, and then once I got, in my late 20s till I quit drinking 2.5 years ago, I drank 4 nights a week when I was working or going out after. And now I'm in a phase where I don't anymore. So I don't go to bars to hang out as much as I used to. I still do every once in a while, visit friends or whatnot, but I quit drinking too much. And so one of the things I've noticed, and I notice it when I talk to my nephews or I talk to some of my students or younger people, having those group spaces, and I think some of this is just a change in the culture among like my nephews are more apt to get together with their friends, and a lot of my students are doing what we're doing, but while they're playing video games. When we were going out to sit at diners and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee to bust each other's chops or talk about whatever we cared about, or art or culture or music. We did that going out to diners and then going to coffee shops and then going to bars. A lot, I think, of our younger generation does it while they're wearing VR goggles or headsets while they're playing video games, shooting at each other in Call of Duty or Minecraft or whatever games. So I think some of that is a cultural change as well.
Hey, Kevin?
I think some of this is just moving from like what everything is analog to now there's digital spaces to hang out, right? Which, like, I think for the three of us, just due to age and what we do, are not that we don't know that they exist. Hi, we're doing this over Zoom, but that, like, it's not a default setting.
Yeah, I mean, we all talked about doing this in person, rather than doing it in Zoom, which was fun.
Well, I absolutely think that the change in like what do younger people do to get together has definitely affected places that used to have businesses made out of people who needed a place to hang out and do things together. To the extent that diners had any of that business. But where do you find today? Now I'm going to turn the conversation to like maybe information people might be able to use. Or maybe not, because we're a bunch of cranky old guys who are nostalgic about the way things used to be. Okay, Roy, you can't send people to Pano's on Elmwood, which the building is still there, but now it's a New York slice place run by a New York slice place again, I believe. Roy, give us your today diner satisfactions. Okay, it's not midnight, but where do you go?
Different during the day than at night. During the day, Sophia's. During the day, Mojo Market in Kenmore is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, just perfect every time. And conversation's wonderful there too. Costa's, especially in the summer when they have the patio open, sitting outside and being able to look at Hurdle and wander around there. And during the day and even in the evening, and they don't mind if you sit if you're a regular usually. Um, uh, and then places like places like Tipico. One of my other Tipico is a great place. One of my new favorite spots. I rejoined and this is going to sound super bougie from the guy who's talking about working class diners, but I love the open space at the Albright Knox, and that's in the space where you can go to. And part of the reason I love it is I can get Tipico coffee there. I can get butterblock pastry there. The food there is awesome for what they do, and they don't need to make money. They just need to break even because they're owned by the gallery.
I'm going to rule that off topic. That's an art museum, Roy.
I mean, shit, at that point, Mojo Market is by no means a diner.
Oh,
Like
no, I'm not
that's
saying it's a no. You didn't ask me what diners were. So you said
Oh, but we did ask you to stay on topic, so let's stick to the diner business. We're talking about, I mean, places where people can go and get.
I've had meetings with students at the art because they let you sit in that outside set. It's free to get in.
Anyways, I didn't tell you about my formative diners, so I'm going to take a minute and just my three that I was thinking about this. The first one would have to be Amy's Place, because I was a kid from the cornfields. I didn't even, the only restaurant, most of the restaurants I'd ever been into were McDonald's. And living on the Main Street campus and just being able to you knew if you could just make it to Amy's, you'd be okay. Because you could go in there, you get your eggs, your coffee, your tofu scramble. I was always a sucker for the wheat berry sandwich myself. You get behind one of those wheat berry sandwiches, they pack them full of lentils and all sorts of other goodness. They'll carry you the day. So I was like, and it was a place where people were just hanging out and talking and doing homework. And I remember it being always full. And I remember leaving when I needed to leave. I don't remember being scooted along, but then again, I had the attention span of a gnat. So another place that made a big impression on me was the Wayside, which is in Barry, Vermont, on the road to Montpelier, 302 off of I-89. And I walked in there and I saw, I think, the first of a species that I would come later to recognize as the full-fledged family restaurant, old style, from breakfast to dinner, yes, but breakfast was the mainstay. Every time you sat down, basket of freshly made yeast rolls made there on your table, all the breakfast stuff. You learned that when you sit down at the Wayside, you got to ask the waitress if there's any more banana cream pie left, because if you don't reserve it, it might be gone by the time you finish your meal. So it was just this. I had never seen such a system that just worked so emphatically to get you in, fed amazingly, out, scratch cooking, 45 minutes, budget. And I was like, I just never seen anything like that before. It was like 200, 300 seats. They had squadrons. They had people. It was a system. I was like, this is amazing. And the third one I would talk about is the Red Arrow Diner in Concord, New Hampshire, which was a little smaller and a little scruffier, but was the place you went. Yeah, it was the place you went to sober up after a night of bad mistakes, and try to just make it through. And for me, my common threads of what is a diner became working people food, served at a working person pace. Nobody's got 2 hours. That's part of the reason things turn over is people got things to do. There's also the people hanging out for sure. And another thing was just the absolute essential, basic simplicity of things, just good enough to get everybody fed and done. And so not a lot of extra frills. I mean, the frilliest thing you see at a diner is what, like a squirt of whipped cream on top of a pudding or something.
I was thinking a single leaf of parsley with an orange twist.
Orange twist? Whoa! That's not a diner, Kevin.
No, it certainly was at Perkins.
When I think of what is a diner today, when I think of what brings most of the elements of the satisfactions, except for the hours, Well, if we're going to talk about ours, let's talk about the Holy Feast food truck parked up doing the diner duty that diners used to do at the corner of Main and Winspear in the Sunoco station. And that's where people who used to eat at diners are eating today in University Heights, because it's open till 2 a.m. and they have got a rock solid munchies menu plus a bunch of other things. It's Indian and Bangladeshi guys in there. So I would recommend to anybody listening the paneer burger. These guys take like a half-inch slab, half an inch of paneer, which is cheese, not so salty, and they take it and they batter it and they fry it and they put it on a bun with some hot sauce and like chilies and stuff. And holy Toledo, they sell it for like $7 with fries. I mean, it might be $8. Please check me on the price, but I was like, see, this is diner food. It's something. Relatively inexpensive. It's going to fill you up. It's going to soak up some of that stuff, and it happens to be Indian guys handing it out of a truck instead of a Greek guy pushing it across the counter.
But I think economics matter, right? Like part of the reason $7 is that they're doing it out of a truck. They're not doing it out of a brick and mortar, right? Like now a lot of these things, like, it no longer, given the cost of real estate and the cost of goods, it doesn't make sense to open up a place where you're selling stuff for under $10. There's the reason that most restaurants that open now all have full liquor license, all do things a little differently here, and the chef recommends 3 to 4 plates per person. It's because you need to actually justify having this space, and you need to get maximum dollars out of people, and you need to like have these minimums of $40 a head when somebody walks in the door at the very least to justify even turning on the lights.
Yeah.
Maybe in the end the lesson is diner will find a way. Maybe not in the usual forms that you are familiar with, but in another way, Roy.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in that sense, I think a lot of, and I love that description. I think a lot of, that whole food truck street food thing fills that diner gap as far as that working class, working person food, all hours of the night, wherever you can get it. And I think that's filled the gap here. I think it does in other cities as well. One thing I wanted to talk about too, if you don't mind, going back to that diner idea. And I think for me, and it's just the way we see diners portrayed, like in Coen Brothers movies or in films or in detective stories. You either get this college bohemian weirdness, like where you could go and there's people of all ages talking about any subject under the sun, or it's this like small town space where you want to know who's doing what where. Well, the sheriff's there and the mayor's there, and the waitress has all the information about everything that's ever happened in the town. And I don't think I think that part is we've lost some of that because of what we've been talking about, the corporatization, the cost, the not having those spaces to hang out as much, going in with that stuff. I think we still get some of it, but I think some of it has.
Well, things change and you're always going to lose something, but people who, okay, when I miss diners sometimes, what I'm missing is a person I met there, a person I saw there, the person, the server who knew my name and could get me stuff. When we're looking now for the sort of comfort and to a certain extent, the communal activity of eating together. I mean, I think of a place like Niagara Cafe, Puerto Rican restaurant, a million people eat there, a million meals, reliable as the sun rising, and it's working people's food. And there are tables where you can sit and hang out. They don't have servers anymore, and it's all paid cash. But every time I go in there, there's people hanging out. And if I had time, I would hang out there with people.
Yep. 99 on Bailey is like that.
Yeah.
Same way.
Idea.
That big circle rotating table is awesome.
And the speed and reliability of the food is diner-ish, right? So maybe it's a diner with a Vietnamese accent.
It's even faster, isn't it? I mean, like Niagara Cafe, Monty's, I think is definitely in that kind of category as a place that definitely serves a community. But like the food is already made, right? Like they're like you are kind of getting hit on the door as soon as you pay. Like, you're welcome to sit down and eat it, but it's not like Niagara Cafe is not built out for 95% of everything they sell is designed to go out the door, not to be eaten in the place, right? And I think the diner, that's kind of inverted. Like, I don't, it was rare when I would go to diners to see anybody really getting to go. Like, oh yeah, I called in my order for 3 souvlaki breakfasts is not a really common thing.
Oh, hang on. I mean, last time I was sitting in Nick's on Amherst Street, steady stream of takeout going out the door. I think a lot of diners are doing buku takeout.
Oh, now, but I don't think that like we're talking about era comparisons, which is I think what we were doing.
Yes, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Hey, if you were going for diner today, Mr. Thurston, where would you go?
I think Nick's is on Amherst is definitely like the least changed if we're thinking about in these terms, right? Like, like there are waitresses and chefs there who came with the building, and definitely know the history of everybody who's been a roofer or a public department worker or a local politician who has gone through those doors. I was at Swan Street this morning because that's my Monday morning treat for myself. And that still, I mean, that's interesting, right? Because it winks towards nostalgia while being very, very modern and also being like in an economically subsidized zone. Like that's a things that happen in Larkinville are a completely different world in that regard, right? Because there's state money behind getting people to want to go to that area. But yeah, so I love Swan Street, love Larkinville. L Towns, in the North Towns is somewhere we still go. Mom likes it there, and you got to go where mom likes, especially when mom's picking up the bill. Um, yeah, like those are probably the three that I probably rotate to the most.
I would postulate that some of the diner activity that has been lost from sectors that you're used to seeing is being picked up perhaps in other sectors. In support of this proposition, I bring to your attention El Salam Diner and Kebab House on Bailey. Have you ever been there?
I'm Bailey. No, I've not been to like too many places on Bailey.
So I was initially invited to go there by my friend Renata Tony, and we met there and walked in. And as I wrote in the review, holy cow, it's an Indian restaurant. But if you didn't look at the food, you would swear you were in an old-fashioned diners. Like these guys do everything except for wear those little peaked white paper hats that they used to wear. What I mean by diner is it's fast, it's efficient, they're so friendly. Like it's the friendliest place. Like it was like, look, for me to notice, I was like, what is with these people? But I came back another time, they're just like that. They're just like friendly. It's like you want cheers, but in a diner setting, and they happen to be making, alu samosa, go into El Salam Diner, and that's not your crowd because you're not Bangladeshi. But for those, if you're part of the Bangladeshi neighborhood, I mean, it is.
I like that. I like that definition change, maybe of going, as the diner needs have changed, and thinking about it more as, not just breakfast food or not just that, but having that, if we say, let's say maybe our definition needs to change. You just say, look, quick working class food that's there and is, executed well, fresh ingredients done, whether it's Nick's Place, whether it's 99, whether it's Al Salam, whether it's Alibaba on Military and Kenmore, same kind of thing, servicing a neighborhood and an area. I think maybe that needs to be maybe the definition of diner has changed as the times have changed along with it.
That's a little too loosey goosey for me.
Oh,
I mean, I feel like at that point, like Joe's New York style pizza and extra extra get qualified into that, right? Because it's well executed food that comes out fast, and for like it's working class food. At that point, like we're like that's so I don't know. It's too broad.
Okay, well, I have no problem with saying it's not. I mean, maybe it's something else, and maybe it is, whatever it happens. But I mean, our original. I'm trying to look at our original notes.
once upon a time, horse-drawn carriages ruled the streets.
Well,
You know,
this whole discussion started with saying that we didn't have enough. And I think the funny thing is, and Kevin and I would have this lament a lot while we were at Godot. And while we were either waiting for customers or we had just finished serving customers and were cleaning up, and there aren't enough places to go to breakfast. We live in a city of 270,000 people, and within where Cafe Godot was on Porter, within a 2-mile circle, there were like 14 places to get breakfast. And that's not counting the corporate places. So I think we have this thing in Buffalo, and it drives both of us nuts. Like, what we really need in Buffalo is an open air fish market. 600 miles from an ocean? Really? We need an open air fish market here? And I think that's where this discussion about diners came up for Kevin and I. And I think Kevin said there aren't any diners anymore. And I was like, no, there's shit tons of them in every neighborhood has. And I mean, and literally every neighborhood, every near burb has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those breakfast joints. And if we expand your definition, Andrew, I think every neighborhood has 10 or 12 or 13 of those. And I think that's where, we have to. That's where I think sometimes in Buffalo, we sometimes in Western New York, we want more than we don't think we have anything, or we want stuff that economically we don't support in a lot of ways, or we can't support because of the size of our city and the fact that we're the 70th media market.
Yotality, though.
What was that?
We did get Yotality, the yogurt shop with the toppings.
Yep.
So, well, I think
sorry. I just want to say that I think, to be more particular, what I was saying to Roy when this all came up was just that no one's going to replace a closed diner with another diner at this point anymore. Like that economic model just doesn't kind of work here now. Presently.
We agreed on that. And maybe
like no one's gonna, if you buy Town, you're not going to be serving breakfasts that are under $10 because you're never going to make your money.
Although I do think we're
even on that site, but that's a real estate issue.
Absolutely.
Which is still part of a restaurant.
Well, it's a real estate issue. It's a cost issue. It's everything else. I also think too with I think I would give you, I agree with you almost 100% there, Kevin, except for one thing. I think in certain neighborhoods where we've had new immigrants and other people coming in, I mean, we talked about Alibaba, we talked about Al Salam, we talked about 99. All of those places are not neighborhoods where people are like, oh, I want to move to Buffalo and live on Bailey and Winspear, or I want to move to Buffalo and live, and it doesn't, it's not what it's something that I think that is something that's unique, where those diners that can turn over, there's a unique opportunity for where we're getting new people coming in and reinvigorating neighborhoods, where in those neighborhoods, we may get more immigrant folks from all over the world opening up different cultural spaces that'll force us to, it might not be a diner to us old white guys because you can't get eggs and hash browns, but it sure as hell is a diner to a Bangladeshi or somebody from Myanmar or somebody from Singapore or somebody from whatever other community that happens to be coming in. And I think that's awesome. And I think it's something we should cherish and share with the rest of Western New York to get people in Western New York. And I think one of the reasons I like what Andrew does is because you get people from Western New York who normally might not leave Lancaster or West Seneca or Cheektowaga or Orchard Park to come in and go to places where they normally would stay on a thruway until they got to the hockey game or to their job downtown or on the bridge to Canada and go home. And that's awesome, Andrew. And I think that that's something that maybe we should encourage.
I agree that I'm awesome. Kevin, I mean,
I didn't go that far, though.
Kevin, isn't part of basically the issue here is that, the costs and the business structures are changing. I mean, I think you make a very good point, or Roy made a very good point, that the real estate pricing right now, there is no financial numbers you can pull that you can sell $10 plates in a building there and make the money that it costs to own and operate that building and all the related operations. That just doesn't work anymore. You're also not going to find a place, buying a couple of acres in downtown Buffalo, for to lay out their supply of plants and garden supplies and put up a greenhouse, because those businesses don't belong in those places. I think if it's true that, and I think it is true that there are fewer diners than they used to be, and they're serving us less, maybe we just need to work on switching our allegiance to a little bit to the places where, yeah, it might not be bacon and eggs. Maybe they don't serve bacon because they're halal, but they are places where community gets together, people are eating, get regular stuff, and you support them. They're there for you when you need them. And maybe it's a, diner nouveau, or, next, whatever, post diner. I know, what do you want to call it? Places that do the diner thing without being strapped down by the diner's economic problems at this point.
Do you just want me to comment on your comment? Like, I'm not sure.
Is it, can we move behind the diner in our hearts?
Oh, I mean, I'm happy to eat anywhere. Like, I mean, that's not, like, yeah, the diner could be going the way of the soda shop, right? I mean, like, Elmwood Soda and Pastry was like the last place standing that made 20 different cakes, and all of that kind of stuff. And like that fought on for a bit, but eventually like that kind of dies, right? Like in like, but we see things switch back, right? Like in 20 years, maybe there'll be a bunch of like, collectively owned diners out in the world, or tipping is banned and everyone has health insurance. I don't know, right? Like, I mean, but because like we've seen that with bakeries, right? Like, like it became harder and harder to find fresh baked bread, and now I feel like that's swung back a little bit, right? But also I think one thing that we didn't talk about with diners too is this like, and community spaces and all of that, is the amount of places I can get to bring me food now, and I don't have to leave my own house, is also phenomenal, right? Like the diner menu in part too is gigantic because it's there to please everybody.
Mhm.
But now I can order tacos for me, have, then pick up Chinese for Jenny, and then like stop somewhere else to get like, I don't know, some
Dino
pizza
nuggets.
for Fiona, right?
To
Like
be
the same person's bringing it to me. I don't have
so
to
to
go
be
anywhere.
clear, that what you're saying is you're confessing to having killed the diner yourself personally.
Pretty much. I mean, when I put out my last cigarette and then became a dandelion root drinker as opposed to coffee, it all changed.
Mm. Well, let's face it. If the diner hangs around as much as it has, and we could still go to the places that we have, then maybe, us old white guys could just stop complaining for a little while.
Well,
Go to
then go to Tim
Sophia's.
Hortons or Cafe Aroma in the morning, or McDonald's.
People make choices. When people say to me,
Amen.
how come there's no good pizza? I'm like, when I get done talking to them, what it turns out often to be is, how come there's no restaurants within my laziness comfort level for me to get to? They don't really mean there's no restaurants. So it's just like, how come what I want's on the end of my block? And I'm like, well, the world's a complicated place and it doesn't always work that way. But I can tell you what your actual choices are if you were willing to grapple, with the reality of the situation. And I think the reality situation is that, let's face it, diners are alive. They're not what they used to be, but there is still, I think you can agree or disagree, that there's still enough diners left for us to hold on to. Agree? Disagree?
See, I agree 100%. And again, I think that's where I took it, where I was saying, like, I still don't know. Again, depending on your definition of diner, I still don't know that there are significantly less diners. I really don't. I think I think
Town and Acropolis are both gone.
Oh, that's absolutely been established. As a matter of fact, Roy, there are fewer diners and fewer hours of diner.
There's
sure.
fewer hours without a doubt. And
The economics has beaten the
maybe,
towns out of the marketplace, right? We just
well,
talked about this. Come on, Roy,
the
work with
town
us.
is out of the marketplace for a ton of reasons, Andrew. And one of them is, again, the biggest one is the fact that I heard a rumor, well,
Oh.
when Brick Bar was for sale on Allen Street, that's now a 1.5 or $1.75 million building. So what is the town in the corner with that parking lot? That's a $3 million building. Of course, there's not going to be a diner. But within one, I can still go to Mythos. I can still go to Mythos.
Cafe
There's still
59.
Cafe 59, Mythos,
Cafe
Tipico,
59, which deserves, I mean, it's diner adjacent at least, right?
100%. And so my point is there's still within a 10-minute walk and within a 5-minute drive, there's still 15 other spots to serve me what the town served me and to get what I want to get. So I mean, it's like I don't think that there's so much less or that it's not there. I do think it's different. I do think the cultural space is different. I do think that I do think there's definitely changes and that there is a nostalgic want for something for that bohemian weirdness or that small town essence. But I don't necessarily sometimes, and I think this is part of the problem, and I think we're still right sizing in Buffalo, and I hate using a corporate word because I love hospitality and I don't think people should be put out of business. We have an unbelievable amount of choices for places to get food and go out and do things. And compared, I mean, I was just in San Diego, and per
I think
person,
we can all agree that Buffalo deserves a round of applause for its restaurants.
absolutely.
You guys aren't going to clap? You're not going to clap. Come on.
Kevin's contrarian.
Thank you. Well, and thank you to two members of the restaurant, community on and off, mostly on, for the work that you and all your compadres have done. Unsung heroes, people whose names will never be heard, but without them, the garbage would never make it to the dumpster and the train would not leave on time. Janice, thank you for joining us. And do you guys have any last words? Wrap it up before we conclude this session?
Yeah, I just, well, one, I want to thank you for letting us do this. This was fun. I always enjoy chatting with people I like about things that I think are important. And also just the shout out to all those places, whether it was JJ's, whether it was Alton's, whether it was Tom's, Perkins, and all the people in the day, and then the coffee houses and those places where that culture was met. It is literally some of the best, greatest conversations and times in my life, and some of my deepest friends and friendships were cemented and established in those kinds of places. And I, for one, am happy and grateful and lucky that I have them. And,
all right,
thanks
Kevin.
for shining a light on it.
Yeah, thanks you for having us and hosting this conversation. And yeah, like I spent so much of my teenage years when, like you're gathering as much change as you possibly could to go somewhere, in these spots, like, I mean, they meant a lot. And I think that's why I'm having this conversation. It is definitely nostalgia laden, but I also think there are relevant current factors that we've discussed that make it still valid to talk about.
Well, thank you. And the diner is dead. Long live the diner.
Here,
Thank you, everyone.
You're here.
Bye.
Thanks.